time for this week's vlog, and as I mentioned last week, I thought we'd talk about seed saving. It's actually quite late in the evening on the plot. I just haven't had time yesterday or today to film this, so hopefully we won't lose the light. It is definitely autumn. Sorry, it's not autumn. Autumn is definitely approaching, I should say, and you can really feel the nights closing in, especially when it's overcast like tonight. We've had full moon the last few nights though, so that was nice. But yeah, seed saving. So a lot of plants, it's fairly easy to save your seeds from, so it's definitely something worth doing. Partly because plants that you grow from home-saved seeds tend to grow better because they're used to your climate and used to your soil, used to your microenvironments that you have, right? So they are geared to, and you also know that those plants grow well where you are, right? But there are other positives as well, like obviously the cost is cheaper because you don't have to buy new seeds, like for example sweet peas. You know, buying seeds every year it does mount up, doesn't it? It's one of our biggest expenses as gardeners. And it's also better for the environment. A lot of seeds have a lot of air miles attached to them, so any way we can reduce that is always good, of course. And it's quite rewarding knowing that you've saved those seeds. So one of the easiest ones, if you like sweet peas, is to save the seeds from these. So unfortunately, I've grown mine mixed up like this, with all the colors growing in the same space. So saving the seeds is going to be a little bit trickier, but I have a solution. Let me show you. So I've actually moved away from the sweet peas because I wanted to show you something. Let's have a look. So we're actually sat here by one of my blueberry bushes. And if you grow blueberries, you know, maybe, how much the birds love them. So the way, I don't know who came up with this, but they're a genius. You can use organza bags, so they're like for jewelry or whatever. You can buy them in bulk online. And they can be used to just protect your fruit. Obviously, if you have a massive bush, you can't protect them all. It would be better to mesh the whole thing. But if you're like me and your bushes are so small, it's quite a good use for them, right? But the other use is to either to isolate certain flowers that you want to save seeds from, or also to label them, right? So I'll explain. So with my sweet peas, I want to know which one's which, and it's obviously very clear when the flower's in bloom, but once the seeds develop, they all look the same. But if I use these organza bags and cover the flower, you can do it towards the end when the flower's already spent, if you don't want to impede the way it looks, or in fact maybe pollination. I'm not entirely sure how sweet peas are pollinated, if they need pollinators or if wind is enough. But I do know they don't cross that readily. You have to actually put in some effort to do that. So growing them together is not going to be a problem. They won't cross. But you do want to distinguish which one's which, right? Or at least I do. So what my plan is to use these organza bags and put them over the fading flower. And inside the organza bag, I put a note on a waterproof, let's put it that way, piece of something in waterproof pen, just describing the color, and then I know what those seeds are. And you know, you don't need many. I think maybe I sowed 20 seeds possibly from each variety with my 2 sowings I did, and you can easily get those from like maybe using 2 bags, so you don't need many unless you have loads of varieties, right? So that was my plan for my sweet peas, because I know some of them, it was the second year growing them and I definitely used up all the seeds left in the packet for those. So those are priority, getting the seeds saved for those. So there are other vegetables and flowers maybe that cross more easily, that is not that easy to save seeds from. I'm thinking of the squash family, which includes cucumbers, melons, winter squash, summer squash. They're very promiscuous, so will cross-pollinate. I can't say for sure that an indoor cucumber would cross with a winter squash, but if you grow several winter squash or several cucumbers, there's a potential that they cross, right? I know with the melons, a watermelon is different enough that it won't cross with a honeydew, or at least the watermelon I have. So there is some wriggle room, but you should be aware, and if you're on an allotment site and someone else grows the same variety that you have in close proximity, it might not be as safe as you thought to save the seeds from these plants. And the other obstacle that you might have are open pollinated versus F1 varieties. So open pollinated are usually the heirloom varieties, and from companies that sell specifically open pollinated varieties like Real Seeds, for example, in the UK. So those type of places, they pride themselves on not indulging in selling people F1 varieties. So F1 varieties is a proprietary cross between two parents. So any seeds that you save from these plants won't come true. No matter how careful you are with cross-pollination, they won't come true to the parent because the line isn't stable. It's from the first cross. So when you create a new variety, you have to practice inbreeding for about 20 generations before you can claim some stability to the line. And this is the first in those 20, right? So it is very much unstable, and there's basically no chance that you'll get what you thought you would going into it, right? So I wouldn't try to save from F1 varieties unless you like an experiment. Other vegetables that can be tricky to save seeds from are the brassica family. Mainly because all brassicas, I don't know if you know this, but all brassicas that we grow are stemming from the same family, the same root, the wild mustard. So the kohlrabi, the cauliflower, the what's it called? The calabrese, they all come from the same parent, and they readily cross with each other. So, you know how easily brassicas bolt? If you want to save seeds from brassicas, it would be best to grow them alone, right? So you don't have any risk of any other brassica flowering at the same time as the one you want to save seeds from. And they're also a little bit different, as in, if you want to have a healthy genetic mix, for brassicas, it's advised to have at least 20 plants. So that is quite an undertaking, and something maybe you wouldn't get into unless you're professional and you have a polytunnel that you can give up the space for 20 plants and let them go to flower. So I think for me, oh, here's the kitty cat. For me, brassicas, I buy the seeds. There she is. Hello. This is not my cat, this is the neighbor's cat, but she loves it on the plot. And she's gorgeous. Look at those markings, eh? She's a little slinky thing compared to my big monster cat. Oh, you're gonna go to the toilet on my plot? I bet you are. But one of the easier ones to save seeds from are your tomatoes. Obviously, don't save seeds from your F1 varieties like Sun Gold. It's not worth it. If you love Sun Gold as much as I do, you will buy the seeds. But all your heirloom varieties, so easy to save the seeds from. All you need to do is collect them from the fruit, a ripe fruit, when you cut it open. So you just squeeze them out into a glass of a little bit of water, and then you wait for it to develop a mold, slightly ferment the seeds, which will destroy the gelatinous covering of the seed, which is protective, right? Which happens naturally when seeds fall to the ground. If a tomato would fall to the ground, it would go moldy, and then the seeds would be dispersed that way. So you need to sort of reenact that in a glass. So once it got moldy, you can then rinse those seeds. And after they've been washed and you can feel there's just a seed there, none of the gelatinous substance around them, lay them out on a porcelain plate or a china plate and leave them to dry, not in direct sun, not too hot, just like on a windowsill out of direct sun maybe. And if you leave them on paper, they will stick right when they're dry. So it's best just to leave them on straight on the porcelain, and then you can just ping them off. And that's all you need to do. And then you can share them around to all your friends, right? And they'll be really happy for all those fancy tomatoes everyone's growing this year. So I've got a few crazy varieties this year, and I'm definitely planning on saving seeds, you know, from the Black Beauty, because it's everyone's favorite. And there's definitely a few here. I really am excited about this massive ox-heart type Belarusian heart tomato, right? And the good thing about tomatoes is that they are self-fertile, the flowers, and the male part does not stick outside the female parts, right? It's actually inside, kept inside here. So it's very unlikely, unless you actually want them to cross-pollinate, right? The only caveat to that is the big varieties like these, like the big tomato varieties, sometimes tend to have those fused mega blooms, and those ones, because they are not naturally formed, they might have the stamen sticking out of the center, and then they can possibly be cross-pollinated from another variety to that one. So if you want to create your own F1 variety, try to come up with a rival to the Sun Gold, you know, you can do it. You'll just have to separate the pistil. Am I getting those two the wrong way around? Anyway, I'll insert it here if I get it wrong. But you can definitely cross tomatoes. It just takes a little bit of human effort. On the other side are the part of the same family, the nightshade family are the sweet peppers and the chilies. They, on the other hand, if you look at their flowers, you can distinctly see the male and the female parts. So there is a high risk of cross-pollination within the family. So there are different families of chilies, for example, the Chinese or the habanero, you know, and they are more or less promiscuous with each other. But the safest thing to do there is to isolate the flower before they open. And because you're isolating, you know, or if you're producing a lot of seed, you can isolate the whole plant, right? Or only grow that plant. But obviously then, because you're isolating it, insects won't have access to it. So you have to pollinate it yourself by flicking it or using a Q-tip or a brush. Right, so that's exactly what I'm planning on to do with all my chilies. So they've all got these organza bags on. So this is a lipstick sweet pepper. I need to harvest this one really. And I put this bag on here because I saw there were flower buds coming through. And I'm flicking this to try to make sure that these flowers in here are pollinated. These ones out here have been exposed to other so I can't trust the seeds from those. But if I get these ones here, you could remove the bag once the fruit's formed. Obviously there's no risk of cross-pollination then, but you obviously want to mark them as the fruit that you are going to collect seeds from. So the chili fruits and the pepper fruits that you are collecting seeds from, you wait and wait and wait until they are fully mature fruit. So compared to a jalapeno that you might pick green, or a padron pepper that you will usually pick green to eat, you need to leave them on the plant until they go that deep red, or sometimes the fruit is deep orange or whatever, you know, whatever, that deep yellow like a lemon drop, right? So you need to know the variety and know when it's fully mature, and that's when you take the seeds out. So chilies specifically, the hot ones, the oil that they produce is obviously something spectacular. So I don't grow any of the super hot ones, thankfully. I don't really have an interest in it, but I know a lot of people do. So if you want to save those seeds, make sure you have gloves handy, because you don't want this on your fingers, because chili oil does not come off with water. It sticks around and you'll inevitably get it in your eye or somewhere even more sensitive, right? So you do not want that. So wear the gloves. And chili oil is so potent, it will eat through those gloves. So change them often. But otherwise, it's the easiest thing to save seeds from. You just get the seeds out from the fruit, leave them again on a piece of on a plate to dry, and then ping them off and store them for next sowing. So easy peasy. Peas is another one that's very easy to save from, just like sweet peas. You basically just leave them on the plant to dry as much as possible. If it's going to rain a lot, you can remove them and let them dry in my greenhouse, for example. So these are the yellow Monch 2, golden sweet they're called. So I've collected plenty here, way more than you need. So you can also eat the dry peas in pea soups in winter and whatnot, so it's not a waste of time. I have actually saved from quite a few varieties. I've still got my purple ones are still on the plant actually, because they've stayed around for a long time. And similarly, beans are also very easy to save seeds from. So similarly with the peas, you have to leave them on the plant to go papery and dry. And you don't have to worry so much about the rain, because the pods are fairly waterproof and actually protect the seeds from going wet and start growing. So if you've ever left your broad beans on the plant for too long, you can actually even start seeing them sprouting, right? So if you think about it, in nature, the plant produces the pod then falls to the ground and the seeds grow out of the pod as it disintegrates. So you kind of want to get the seeds and dry them before that happens, and then when you go to sow them, they'll be ready and activated. Right, let's go check out the other greenhouse. So I saved seeds from my Tumbling Tom tomatoes last year, and they have grown really well. The plants were very vigorous last year, and similarly very vigorous this year. So it's definitely something worth doing with tomatoes, I'd say. Obviously, when you save seeds, only save seeds from plants that are healthy looking, that are growing well, that are producing well. You know, there's no point saving seeds from a sickly plant. You know, you don't want that. So choose your plant wisely, and away you go. Here we are in my melon house, and I don't know if I showed you, but yes, watermelon coming here. I don't know if it will grow to full size. I'm hopeful though, but you can tell by the leaves that they are quite different from the other cantaloupe style melons that I am growing, right? And I think that's one of the indicators that the seeds might be different. So the same is true for my loofah plants. So they are, unless you're growing, there are different species of loofah, different varieties of loofah. So unless you grow several varieties of loofah, you should be fine to save the seeds from the loofah if you manage to grow some. And I'm also growing Serpent of Sicily, which is a Tromboncino style squash, and it's part of the squash family, but the seeds are extremely different, and I don't think that they would cross-pollinate, though I can't be sure. These are things that research needs to be done on. And I also have something called a fig leaf gourd that also looks quite different, and the seeds are different again. So again, this one might also be something I could save seeds from, but will need further analysis. Things like potatoes are very easy to save seeds from. They're basically just your potatoes from the year before. And these are the harvests that I've got. This is Pink Fir Apple. This is King Edward. You can tell by the pink markings. And this is Sarpo Mira, which is really good. I mean, massive potatoes. Really good, one of the blight resistant varieties. So all you need to do to save these is to either, if you're going to plant them for Christmas, just pick a nice one. You don't have to pick the big one. Just because you plant a big potato doesn't mean you get a big yield, a harvest. It doesn't really work like that. But just pick one that is nice, clear of scab and other disease, and that's the one you plant. if you're saving your potatoes to plant for next spring, they will inevitably start growing and maybe go a bit soft. Those things are not a problem. You can just remove the shoots as they start growing. You can still eat them. The one thing you do not want to plant is anything that's got any kind of rot on it, right? You have to discard those, unfortunately. But we all know how potatoes left in the bed start growing again next year upon year, right? Unless you get that potato out. So the only way to kill a potato is to eat it. So yeah, it's hard to kill a potato. But anyway, you shouldn't perpetuate disease through your potatoes, so make sure the ones you plant are healthy looking. And then finally, garlic is another one that's easy to save seeds from. You just keep the largest bulbs back from your harvest this year, and then keep them together as a bulb. And then when you come to plant in October, or whenever is suitable for your climate, you separate out the cloves and you plant them. I would only maybe plant the large ones. So unlike with potatoes, a large clove tend to give a larger bulb. So it's definitely best to, the cloves around the edge, around the outside of the bulb are usually larger. So plant those and leave the little ones in the center. They're good to eat. Oh yeah, and there's sunflowers to save seeds from as well. As long as you can keep the birds from eating them. Just bear in mind there are sterile sunflowers, so just be mindful when you buy seeds for your display next year not to buy the sterile ones if you want to save the seeds from them, or indeed if you want to feed the birds, I guess, though they should still produce seeds. Sorry, ignore that last bit. Anyway, I had a great time actually talking about seed saving. It's one of those things that are really close to my heart, and yeah, I will see you next week.